Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining the April 2021 Regional Housing Forum. I know it's spring break this week, so I appreciate all you who have joined us. Even on spring break, we had over 500 people sign up today, so a great turnout. We have a lot to cover today, and it's rather technical in nature. It seemed important to get this information out, as its successful execution will mean the difference in having a home for thousands of individuals and families. But we are aware that there are larger issues on the lack of affordable housing that are still prevalent, and we will continue to hold these issues up going forward. So we're going to focus today on the Emergency Rental Assistance Program. In the first round of the program funding, Georgia received a total of $710 million to support renters who owe rent and utilities because of the COVID pandemic. Now, that sounds like a lot of money, but it goes out statewide, and we're going to learn today that there still may be gaps. Our conversation today will focus on how these programs are being rolled out, the lessons we are learning along the way, and there are many, and what changes are needed before the next round of funding comes, and then identifying any gaps of those who may not be able to get served. Before we get started with our guests, there's two quick items I want to mention. If you're watching and need rental assistance, please visit the website listed below for more information. And if you'd like to continue today's conversation, this is something we're just trying, is we're going to have a post-forum small group discussion to be held on April the 21st. There will be details on our website. We realize in the time of having online conversations instead of being in the room, it leaves little time to really be with each other, talk to each other, to talk about the forum after the forum. So we hope you'll participate in that. And finally, I just want to do some thank yous up front today. I usually do this at the end, but this is a volunteer effort. It continues to be a volunteer effort since the mid-'80s when we began. I want to thank first George Bergen from A&DB, who is our producer and my trusted partner in this endeavor. We have an advisory committee and a steering committee that help us. We confer with them each month, and in our steering committee, we talk every week. You know, George and I have talked for probably every day for the last 2 weeks to pull this off. And I'd also like to thank Cox Curry, who has been very helpful for this particular forum and very helpful in supporting the work of SOAR. We'll hear an update from them later in the program. So please join me in welcoming the Georgia Department of Community Affairs, DCA, Commissioner Christopher Nunn, and the Director of Housing Assistance Division, Dave Westnut. Commissioner, thank you. A sincere thanks for you and Dave to be here. I know there's a lot of demands on your time. We were just talking about everybody's on spring break, but us, we're still in the office. We have a lot to cover today. And I think we'll begin, Commissioner, with just give us the status of the rollout for the first allotment. And I know you'll make the distinction. This is really coming through U.S. Treasury and not through other departments, which makes a difference. So if you can start with giving us an update, and thanks again for being here.
Well, thanks, Bill. I appreciate it, and hopefully you can hear me okay. I want to echo your thanks to all of those who have been instrumental in this program, and really, focusing on this issue over the last year. To everyone who has joined today, thank you for your time and attention. And I am joined by my colleague Dave Wisnett, and I'm going to allow him to delve into some of the details. I thought it might be helpful just to set the stage. Again, I am Christopher Nunn, the Commissioner of the Department of Community Affairs, or DCA, as you will hear it referred to. And DCA serves as the state's housing agency. as Bill has just laid out, we're here today to talk specifically about emergency rental assistance. And, if you're dialed into this call, certainly you appreciate the pressure that coronavirus has put on the housing market, particularly rental housing. And it's a complex issue. In terms of cause, you've got unemployment numbers that spiked last April to nearly 13% here in Metro Atlanta and elsewhere in the state. And while those numbers have dropped to less than 4% in parts of our state, 4.7, I believe, here in Metro Atlanta, the numbers alone don't tell the complete story. First of all, economic data don't matter if you don't have a job, and if you're facing eviction. And if your job depended on hospitality or tourism or air travel, you're probably still experiencing hard times. And even if you do still have your job, but you got COVID or at least exposed, you may have gotten behind on your rent, which can seem like an insurmountable challenge. So, there are a lot of issues. And then in terms of effects, while tenants are, faced with the potential for eviction, there are also an equal number of landlords who, perhaps because of the eviction moratorium or just because they're good people, have been carrying the financial burden for as long as a year now. So it's a complex problem. And you're right, Bill. The emergency rental assistance program and programs, I'll speak to that have been stood up, are federally funded. So it's a state and local effort to address the need. But because of the source of funding, this is related to coronavirus, COVID-related delinquencies. Bill, you talked about kind of the larger issues versus the emergency rental assistance, and I think that's an important distinction. In December, Congress allocated an initial $25 billion. And there's more funding in the more recently passed American Rescue Plan Act. Of those initial funds, as you said, Georgia as a whole received $710 million to pay rental and utilities arrearages, and in some cases, a few months of rent going forward. Before I hand off to Dave, I want to touch on three very important points. And we've talked about the federal funding now, I think 2 or 3 times. First of all, because these are federal funds, I know this is coming. I haven't heard it yet, but it will never be as easy and simple as many folks, myself included, would like it to be to distribute $25 billion. I've heard it for months from other states who, like us, worked to design a program that was as simple as possible for both landlord and tenant. But unfortunately, the accountability that comes with these funds requires certain documentation and procedures be adhered to. I grew up in a small town. I appreciate the ability to make things work in your community, but when we rely on the federal funding that involves that many zeros, we simply can't do business on a handshake without supporting documentation and process integrity. So, first point. Second point, there are 13 programs that have been launched or are being launched in our state. Our agency, DCA, launched the Georgia Rental Assistance Program on March 8th. There are 12 local governments who also received funding to serve their local communities. And you're going to be hearing from some of those communities momentarily. We're working very closely with them. And we didn't design the framework. I understand this creates some challenge and complexity. I think about the landlord who owns property in multiple jurisdictions, each with their own program and perhaps their own rules. I think about the tenant who hears about this program from a coworker or a family member, but is confused about where do I go in my community. So we get that there's a challenge, and we're doing our best to communicate and make this effort as easy as possible. I keep in mind what my friend at U.S. Treasury recently said to me. We are operating under enormous time constraints, and we're building a huge program the best we can and as fast as we can, but it's not perfect. Bill, I like to think that we are a learning community. I expect we will continue to make iterative changes, based on data and experience as we go. I guess the alternative would be to spend a year building an incredibly well integrated platform and team, but then we would have missed the window of need. So
exactly,
you understand that. Lastly, and Dave, I'm about to toss it to you, but let me make one point clear. And Bill, I'll defer to you and other experts on the totality of need on the larger issues. But as it relates to COVID related need, I think this is an important point, and that is, while we've heard about several local programs that have closed or paused, simply in order to process the enormous initial volume of applications, relative to the funds that were allotted. And there was a great article in the AJC last week that highlighted, the point and really alluded to an issue of scarcity. Now, if you're facing eviction on Monday and you're not able to submit an application for assistance, I understand your concern. But collectively, we have the resources and will to assist if we're able. On a macro basis, I've got less concern that with the initial $710 million and the additional funds that were allocated through the American Rescue Plan, that we'll find our state in a position of scarcity. I was on a call yesterday with 13 southeastern states, and we discussed this very issue. So I know one of the items that will be discussed on today's agenda is what happens when jurisdictions run out of funds. And let me just be clear up front.
That question was coming.
Yeah, exactly. So the state remains committed to working with each of these 12 local communities. Once each has exhausted that allotted funding, we're ready, willing, and able to jump in and support the needs of all Georgians. So I just wanted to make that clear. I know you asked for a status update on the Georgia Rental Assistance Program. So let me toss it over to Dave and let him get into some of the specifics, if that's okay.
Yeah, Dave, you're getting to be a permanent member of the Housing Forum. Welcome back. So you really, the status and when the counties run out of money and lessons learned, we're giving it to you, Dave.
Well, thank you, Bill, and thank you, Commissioner. And I appreciate the opportunity to appear again as a frequent guest star. I feel like I'm almost a permanent fixture here recently, but it's great to be here. And I would say that it's very exciting to have the resources to assist our fellow Georgians in such a meaningful way. It's also been a little daunting, as the Commissioner alluded to try to build a program essentially from scratch in such a short period of time. But we are doing exactly that. And making great progress. And I think that some of our experiences probably will mirror the experiences that some of the other jurisdictions have. Instead of focusing really on operations, I want to talk a little bit about sort of the experiential standpoint. So one of the things we've done is we have contracted with a statewide call center, but primarily we intend to drive interactions with landlords and tenants through an online portal where either the tenant or the landlord can initiate an application. And so, kind of as Christopher mentioned, there are a lot of documentation requirements, of course, that come with these federal dollars. And really, our belief is, and our continued belief, is that it's much more efficient to capture the information digitally to expedite the processing. So just to give you a few metrics, in our first 3 weeks or so, we've had nearly 100,000 unique visitors that have come to our website, and that has resulted in about 13,000 initiated applications. The key word there is initiated, because each application, as we know, that requires input and documentation from both the landlord and the tenant. So all of that information must be collected, and we've obviously got to match up our landlords and our tenants before the file can be underwritten for payment.
So do you think you consider that at about 10% at this stage? Is that good, or is that, or are we challenged to get more people in that process?
Well, I think that we still need to have more people where both sides have initiated and completed applications. So I would think that it would be one for one. The tenant wants the landlord to get paid and they want their rent satisfied. The landlord wants their rent paid. But we do see a little bit of a disparity. I can tell you we've got a higher percentage of tenants that have completed applications than landlords. But certainly that is something that we are working on through direct outreach. And by direct outreach, I mean phone calls, I mean contact through the forum, I mean emails. We are doing everything we can to get both sides involved in the process.
So Dave, I don't want to interrupt you, but one of the questions I had was just something I learned in the last year is that the majority of apartments are owned by smaller, it's a family or an individual. It's not host properties or family. And there's a trust issue there, is there not? Of really people believing this is for them and they can get through the process?
There really is, and that, as you said, is really a small landlord situation that we've encountered. The larger landlords really have kind of set up an apparatus to work through this process. And I'll give you an example of one company that owns about 3,000 units. They had a number of tenants that did not submit applications when they were contacted through regular means. But what they did is they are setting up days at their properties where the tenants can come by, can use their scanners, can get help if they need help. So the larger landlords kind of have an apparatus to do this. The smaller landlords, this is kind of new. And while we're excited about the amount of money, we also realize that in some ways this almost does sound too good to be true, right? I'm going to pay your arrears going back to March of last year. I may pay 3 months of forward payments. We're going to handle all these utilities. That sounds like a lot to people. And I would say too that this is not something that's totally unexpected. In administering rental assistance programs in my prior life, we used to have landlords, particularly small landlords, who wanted to come down to our office just to verify that we were actual human beings and that we were really involved in this type of program. So, we're doing all we can, again, to convey that this is a real program, that this is government sanctioned, our web addresses, our .gov addresses, but that issue does persist. And that's certainly something we're conscious of in our marketing and in our outreach.
Well, it's kind of reflective of the environment that we're in. A lot of cynicism about government or big institutions, and in a sense, they're there to help you, but that we believe they're really going to come through. You mentioned, Commissioner, and I want to dig a little bit deeper. We're going to hear from several examples of City of Atlanta and Fulton Gwinnett. We picked those three. They're already overwhelmed, right? They have to start processing, and they may run out of money. Just what happens then? I know the answer is you can go to the state, but how does that work?
Yeah, so let me set the stage, and then Dave, you can chime in on any of the further details. There is I think it's important to distinguish between what we'll call reservations against funds and actual payments. So what we have agreed, again, because of the complexity of the Treasury framework that was established, whereby we have funds for 159 counties given the state, but there are 12 communities, 11 counties, and 1 city that receive funds directly. It is entirely confusing from a marketing standpoint and, frankly, from a compliance standpoint to have 2 programs operating in a political jurisdiction simultaneously. And so what our agreement has been with all of those 12 locales is that once they expend the bulk of their funds and deploy those funds, that we have built our system so that we can come online in their communities. That requires some very close coordination, and we are still working on that. None of us have gotten to that point yet, but that is that's the framework that we've set up. Dave, you want to add anything to that?
And this is one that we're going to have to keep coming back to, I think.
No question.
So, yeah.
No question.
It is, and we continue to coordinate with the other jurisdictions. And I would just say, from a logistical process point of view, we have got our system built, and it was built this way from day one, so that there is pre-screening. And if somebody, let's say they're in the city of Atlanta, they would not be able to proceed further with their application. But we do give a link to the information, which is updated as we go, on where they should turn for that rental assistance. But if we were to start funding into one of those other jurisdictions, if they had expended their money, the portal is set up so that we can then turn on that locality so that that tenant or that landlord could go ahead and proceed through with the process. So we're ready to turn that on, and that really is kind of the flip of a switch to make that happen.
We're going to turn. I'm going to ask George in a minute if there's any questions. We really want to get those recorded, even if we can't answer them all today. But very concisely, Commissioner and Dave, what does success look like for you? I mean, if we would put it out there, because we need to know where the finish line is, if we feel like we did a good job, how are you measuring that today?
So I guess I get to go first. And I know that we could get into metrics and things like that we all measure. I think that success for the state is that every Georgian who has a COVID-related rental assistance need is served, and we do that in a manner that is consistent with the guidelines that have been laid out. And is done in a manner that is gets us that keeps us in good graces with Treasury and with the folks who passed this legislation that appropriated the funds. So we serve the need and we do it responsibly.
And I think we have talked before that this coming through Treasury has a different audit trail and different requirements than if it came through HUD or other. Dave, how are you going to define success?
Well, I would echo what the commissioner said, and I would also say that we want to make sure at the end of the day that we really have done the level of outreach and marketing to get to everyone, so that everyone who has this need knows how to interact with us, and that also, and this is one thing that we've done, is we've got over 30 local service partners who are on the ground around the state, so that everyone who needs to apply or wants to apply, that they have got a means to apply and get assistance, whether or not they have broadband access, whether or not they can get into the portal. We just really want to make sure, as the commissioner said, that need is addressed. And part of our responsibility is making sure that word gets out there, which is really one of the things that we're focused on. Beyond just the implementation of the program, but it's the marketing, it's the outreach, it's communication.
One thing I think is those of us who live in an urban area kind of think of urban challenges. I know in building a network of 8 food banks around the state, the challenges in Middle and South Georgia or out on the coast are very different than they are here in Atlanta. So it's almost like a different language we got to speak. So I really understand from personal experience. We have a question here from Cydia Swift. Why were the federal government COVID rental assistance funds given only to DCA and not to the local nonprofits? How can a local nonprofit apply for rental assistance funding? And we've got a lot of nonprofit organizations listening in today, participating. So the question, why are we doing it the way we're doing it? Probably because Congress wrote it that way, but how do nonprofits who are helping folks get access to helping more people?
Absolutely. So, and let me be crystal clear, funds were not given to DCA. Funds were given to the state of Georgia and 49 other states in the United States. That's the way the funds flow. We're the housing agency for the state, which is why we're deploying those funds. I think the answer to how the local nonprofits can be involved. I'm not aware that any local nonprofits are behind on their rent, so you can't apply for the funding, but you can be a very vital part of the deployment. Bill, you just talked about the diverse needs all across our state. DCA is working with and through partners all across the state to ensure that every Georgian has information, has access to, has assistance in applying for these funds. And so I think that the nonprofit community, which I applaud you, and Cydia, thank you for the question. You are a vital part of this system and the network, but the funds are deployed. These are federal funds that are deployed through the state and in a handful of cases through local government.
So in essence, it's going to take a village, isn't it? It's going to take
Amen.
all of us, and each of us figuring out what role we play and how we access resources to play that role. Another question that came up from Jack Harden, who is the commissioner, not the commissioner, but the head of the Regional Commission on Homeless, is there's a risk that the deadline for the commitments at the end of September will arrive, and we hadn't gotten all the funds out. I know we've talked about this a lot. It's a huge challenge because it's a lot of money.
Right.
What do we do?
Yeah, Jack, I appreciate the question, and you're right. You're alluding, for those on the call who aren't familiar, in the initial language, there was some guidance in the Federal Register or that laid out how much funds. It gave some guidelines to really drive states to get these funds out as quickly as possible. I think all along Treasury has given us a degree of confidence that as long as we are doing our job in earnest, which I will assure you that the 13 partners on this call who are funded are working diligently to get those funds deployed. I am not overly concerned that we are going to run up against a deadline. And if you will recall, I mentioned that there are additional funds in the American Rescue Plan Act that was recently passed, and those funds have an even further deadline out. So, Jack, I appreciate the question, and it is certainly one that we are working diligently to address. Though I'm not overly concerned about that at this point in time.
Well, I think that's good news, and certainly knowing other money's coming in behind it, we don't want to leave things on the table, but it has happened in the past. Let me try to get another question in from Mia Fairley. My tenants, and she may be an owner or she may be a nonprofit person, my tenants have no idea where to go in person to obtain rental assistance in Fulton and City of Atlanta. Just a basic question of educating the tenants about how it works, where to go, how to apply. Dave, this may be for you.
Yeah, I can certainly pull that up on our portal. Those are not areas that we're funding into right now, but our portal in the FAQs, if you go there at the bottom, that has the most updated information that we have for other jurisdictions on where to go. Again, as the commissioner noted earlier, some jurisdictions, and I'm not speaking for these two, but some jurisdictions, of course, have cut off their portal process while they process applications that are already in.
And maybe just a final question. I know we could spend another hour on this, but there's always a question about what about homeowners? Is there any money? A lot of people worked hard, took out loans, finally got a home, and then, lost their job because of COVID. Any way to access that?
So not in this program, Bill, but if you will stay tuned, we're going to focus on emergency rental assistance today. As you unpack the American Rescue Plan, there are some additional mortgage assistance funds that we are, we're working to unpack, but that's another conversation for another housing forum.
All right, there you go. And Dave, we'll invite you back, huh?
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, while we're here, I can go ahead and answer that question. On our portal, the information we have is that if you're in the City of Atlanta, you can call 211 or visit UnitedWayAtlanta.org. And if you are in Fulton County, That's fultoncountyga.gov/rent help.
And I think my friend Anna Roach is coming up right behind this.
Yes.
She can definitively answer the question. So
Yes.
we'll defer to her.
We'll defer. Absolutely.
All right, great. Thank you, Commissioner, for a great segue to our next panel, because we're trying to hit each group. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Kind of coming back to it takes a village and us all doing our roles. I know we're all working double time. We will stay in touch and probably have you back.
Well, thank you, Bill, and all of you who are on this call today. Thank you so much for your interest and attention.
And
all right. Hope you guys stick around. There may be questions later.
Thank you, Bill. And if I could just note, if there are any nonprofits that are interested in finding out how to participate more with us on this, shoot me an email. I'd be happy to talk to you.
All right. About 500 emails coming your way, Dave.
That's okay. That's okay. I'm used to it.
All right. Thank you again. Let's pivot to our next panel. Again, we've got a lot of speakers today, a lot of moving parts, but it seemed important to look at this in a holistic way. For our next panel, we have Donna Burnham from United Way of Metropolitan Atlanta, serving the city of Atlanta. We have Matt Elder from Home First Gwinnett Initiative. And we have already, Anna, you're being called out, Anna Roach from Fulton County. So thank you all for being here. I know at least one of you is off on spring break and here this morning to be with us. So let me just get in. What role do you play? And we're just going to kind of go around the circle about how it works in your jurisdiction and the role that you're playing. Anna, since the commissioner said you could probably answer that last question, I'll look to you first.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Bill, thank you for facilitating this forum where we can provide information about programs to our stakeholders. So really appreciate you all taking the lead and having a leadership role in doing that. My name is Anna Roach. I'm Chief Operating Officer for Fulton County, and my role in the Emergency Rental Assistance Program essentially is that I am responsible for administering it. It's part of the portfolio of responsibility that I have within the county. To back up and provide a little bit of information about Fulton County's program, I'll tell you, we challenged our staff to get this program up and running in about 25 days. We received the funding on February 19th in the bank in Fulton County, and then made the presentation to our board in the first meeting in March. At the second meeting in February, and we committed to the board that we were going to launch a program on March 1st. Everybody was pretty much all hands on deck in terms of putting the infrastructure to get this program in place for March 1st. And I'm pleased to say that we were able to successfully do that. We launched at noon on March 1st and not only had a way to have both tenants and landlord apply for the program through our application portal, but we also at that time launched a call center for anyone who did not have access to the internet or a computer. And our call center takers not only fielded questions, but was able to enter application information for any constituent who did not have access to the internet or a computer to fill out that application for him or herself.
And I understand you had a tremendous response.
We did have a tremendous response after launching on March 1st. We had to temporarily close our application portal on March 15th. By March 15th, we have received over 15,500 applications into our portal, which was a call on approximately $55 million worth of funding. As you know, Bill, we received $18 million to service our community in Fulton County. And our fear was that if we allowed applications to continue to come in without catching up on the adjudication side, that we would have our constituents waiting way too long in order to receive a decision. So we decided to pause the application process and double down on our adjudication so that we could get people.
So let me ask there. I mean, looking at it the way we're looking at it makes all the sense in the world. You take in and you say, let's stop for a minute and process what we have. And I think each jurisdiction's kind of faced with that. But that also caused a lot of concern in the community. Articles in the paper, you've already run out of money. What do you do?
Well, that's a very good question. What do we do is we double down on adjudication. We're partnering with a firm out of state now to our adjudication efforts to the tune of 150 other processors that will enhance the processors that we have now to get people decisions. It made absolutely no sense whatsoever for us to continue to have people apply for funding when we know that at some point we would reach our $18 million threshold and ultimately have to say no anyway. And so we thought that was the best approach. We stand behind that. And in fact, we look forward to the additional funding coming from the federal government in hopes that we'll be able to address all of the need within the first tranche of applications that we had.
And you anticipate using the system you've set up for the additional money?
I'm so glad.
So we've got something that we don't have to start over from scratch.
Absolutely. And quite frankly, we set it up in a way where it really was, when we talked to Jack Harden, who everyone will hear from, we were concerned that in our region, we did not have a successful emergency response mechanism for deploying funding emergencies. Housing would be obviously the most prominent. And so what we wanted to do with the establishment of this infrastructure is to put something in place that was scalable if we received additional funding, and something that we could turn on and off like a spigot, just in case we either received another emergency or received additional funding. So we're really proud of the work.
Got it. And let me ask, Matt, how are we doing in Gwinnett? Are you have a similar system, or are you at a similar place of being overwhelmed with opportunity, as we say?
Yeah, good morning, and thank you so much for having me here. It's so nice to see so many of my friends here on the panel and so many of them in the comments as well. In Gwinnett, we are in the midst of the final leg of the design for our emergency rental assistance program. We'll be launching it in late April. Gwinnett County did receive $28.1 million in assistance directly through this round of COVID funding, and they did award it to Home First Gwinnett as its administrator. But it is a true collaborative partnership between us and the county to try and make this program work for all of the different residents and tenants we have. And in Gwinnett, we actually launched Project Reset, which was a rental assistance program out of CARES Act back in November 2020, and have been able to continue that on all the way up until we actually launched the new ERET program. So there won't be a gap between when we have a program available or not. And we have other partners and nonprofits in our community that have money still available for rental assistance as well. So thus far in Gwinnett, since November 2020, we've prevented over 1,100 different evictions from occurring, serving more than 3,000 people, and expended more than $5 million in CARES Act funding, with a little bit yet to go as we kind of get through this. So we're very excited about what that transition looks like. We're excited about some of the different things we're able to do. We started off with very much a keep it simple methodology. We put a Google form together, put it out there to the community. They responded in kind, more than 5,000 applications. And we've been able to partner with Neighborly Solutions to develop a new software solution. I know my friends in Fulton County had used this same solution. It's had rave reviews from tenants and landlords all across who work in both jurisdictions. So we're excited about that. We're excited about really staffing up and some of the things that'll be coming. But within the next few weeks, we'll have more updates on the exact date we're going to launch. But it will definitely be by the end of April, and it will be a very robust program that will offer more than we were able to do with Reset, and really expanding upon the successes we had there and learning from some of the different challenges and different best practices we've also learned from some of our neighbors as well.
Excellent. And it sounds like you just referenced, focusing on what Fulton had done. One of my questions is, do you guys talk to each other? I mean, is there a collaboration here to learn from each other? Donna, I'm going to turn to you. Not your first rodeo. Another question I have is, what have we learned along the way? Because I know there was a lot of learnings in the first round. So for the city of Atlanta, which has been handled through United Way, give us a status update.
Yes. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me. And yes, United Way of Greater Atlanta, we are the administrators for the Incorporated City of Atlanta funds. And so we handled the first round. And like Bill said, there was lots of learnings for the first round. That round started in August of last year and ended it took about 6 months for us to spend the $18.1 million. We helped over 6,000 individuals in incorporated city of Atlanta.
So what would you say would be the 2 or 3 of the biggest learnings from that?
The first learning I would say is technology. We found out that there was lots of barriers for individuals. Technology can just be a big monster for lots of folks, especially during time of Corona. And so one way we tackled that was to have in-person events. So we had in-person events, about 3 in-person events a week. We followed all the CDC guidelines, and that was a successful strategy. Folks felt more comfortable having an option of going in person, because sometimes people had to upload leases, and these leases can be between 10 to 20 pages, and that can be very challenging for most. For myself, that would be very challenging. So we definitely understood that. For the second round, we plan on continuing with that and having some in-person events as well to serve the community and give the community options. Another learning I would say is a gap. We had a gap of in the beginning of $3,000, and then we had to increase it steadily, which takes time and approval. And so for round 2, we are not going to have a gap. We just really want to help the community where they are. And if they meet the needs and we have the funds available, that's going to be our goal, to try our best to assist them.
And do you have a sense this time if there's going to be a gap? Do you feel like you got enough money this round for what
for round two? For round 2 is $12 million program dollars, and so the average for round 1 was about $3,000 per household. So we're hoping to serve about 4,000 families this go around.
You know, another question that came up was just around the CDC moratorium. I know that's being challenged in different states, so we're waiting on that. But, you know, we found that a lot of tenants as well as landlords didn't really understand that or what the power of that. How do we get that word out? Are you guys working on that? Is that something else the county and city does at another level? Matt, what are you doing in Gwinnett?
Yeah, so in Gwinnett, we have a bi-weekly call with all the different providers that are part of our coordinated entry system and other interested parties. We're over updates with regard to the CDC eviction moratorium, the foreclosure moratorium, and also other developments, both locally, regionally, state, and nationally. One of the things we've really been stressing is the fact that people need to do their best to explain that this is not a blanket moratorium. It does not just cover everybody automatically. You have to identify and do the self-declaration. You have to sign the form, and that each one of the declarations that's come out to date, including the most recent, has an expiration date on it. So if you filled out the form in December, it is no longer good. You have to do the new form, and we try and send that to all of our partners every single time that it comes out, and try and pay attention to that as closely as possible, because we feel like the best way to communicate that to the tenants and the individuals and clients that are most in need are through our nonprofit community, through our partners who are working with them day in and day out. And that starts with communicating to them first and foremost, giving them the information, giving them the documentation, the
So do you give them message points or kind of curriculum to follow? And are you guys doing this in Fulton, Anna and Donna? I mean, this is where it's so important that, you know, our language and what we say and setting expectations.
Absolutely. I think where we address that en masse is through our call center, and there is a script around the eviction moratorium and how constituents access that. I do want to put a plug in for our Chief Magistrate Judge, Cassandra Kirk. And I love the way that she has approached her role and responsibility for adjudicating housing disputes, because she is very community focused and has a whole program around educating the community about resources that they have access to. I know that your team and everybody on this call will hear from Judge Kirk up shortly, but that's another source of education for Fulton County residents.
All right, and I'm going to ask George if there's questions from participants, but let me just, okay. Mr. Henson, are there any assistance for those living in extended stay hotels? Certainly a conversation we've talked about offline. How do we handle that?
I mean, I could jump in first. Our answer is fairly simple. We do not prohibit anyone who has a from applying funding as long as they qualify, and that includes our constituents that are spending stay. So Fulton, we don't exclude extended stay hotel constituents from applying for qualifying.
Okay, and Donna and Matt?
Yeah, extended stays hotels is not included in the program. However, what we
So
will,
it's not in the legislation, right? It's not
Yes.
it wasn't a choice that DCA made.
absolutely.
Right.
And so, but rental security deposits are. So we would hopefully be able to talk with that individual and see if we can get them into some housing and help them with their rental deposits.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a complicated question because it really depends on the status of the person who's in the extended stay. If they're paying their own way and precariously housed, you're going to have a little bit of less opportunities. ERAP through the security deposits that Donna mentioned, certainly an opportunity there. But if they're paid through a third party, like if you were to have an agency using CARES Act dollars to place them in the extended stay, they're literally homeless. Therefore, they're qualified for rapid rehousing or transitional or something else that could help to go beyond that. There also may be organizations or jurisdictions in the state that have home dollars available, that have a TBER program, a tenant-based rental assistance that could also be utilized. So there's a lot of different levers beyond just what may be through ERAP that could be available within the Metro Atlanta region and the entire state to kind of help people who are in extended stays looking to get into some kind of a permanent housing solution.
Okay, Antonio, I'm bad news on that answer, but good news that we're aware of it. Jack Harden may speak to it, but the Regional Commission on Homelessness dealt with this a lot. It may take private money, not public money, to address some of those needs. Eric Speakman, collaborating among the counties and providers. Would like to see that further discussed. Besides tracking each other's software, what's the nature of your conversation? How do you collaborate with each other? Do you have a weekly call or monthly call, or do you just call each other with a Donna calls Anna and say, what do you think about this? How does it work?
Well, I know that I know since City of Atlanta was one of in the first round, we had the money. So there's a lot of lesson learned. And so we've been invited and shared those lessons learned with lots of different counties. We have been on lots of Zoom calls and emails going back and forth. So in the back end, we are working together. It's our goal. It's all of our goals is to really help the community the best way we can. And we need to learn from each other.
So ARC coordinated a call approximately 3 or 4 weeks ago that we all were on. And that was the initial call. We all in contact. Since that, we have had City of Atlanta apply, and as you know, and funding. So on a week, I those applications into a file, and I put that directly at the City of Atlanta so that they are aware and have a good starting point for where the need is in their points with DCA, the United Way, the City of Atlanta, and our surrounding communities once a week, sharing both learnings and information from our application process.
That's excellent. And I think that's the key to getting better, right? Commissioner just wrote me a note and said that DCA is actually working on a schedule for bi-weekly calls to the 13 different providers. So I think more communication there. Rachel Carey, will applicants to the city's rental assistance be capped at the maximum amount of assistance per household? Who would like to answer that? It's probably the same answer for all of you, but.
Well, I can't speak to the city's program, but in Gwinnett, we started with Project Reset with absolutely no cap on the amount of rental assistance, and we're going to maintain that through our ERAP program. We've had people apply who have as little as a few $100s in arrears to upwards of $30+ in arrears. And for our success, in order to incentivize the landlords to want to participate and be an active participant in that process, we have not capped any of the assistance levels in terms of the amount of rent we'll provide. And while we didn't originally have any kind of income level cap on the amount of assistance, because we know COVID attacked communities indiscriminately with regard to socioeconomic status, the legislation does require new income level thresholds that we will replace, but we're going to try and maintain as much as possible our low barrier, high impact model of making it as accessible as we can, and not trying to limit the assistance we can provide by only helping somebody at 20, 30, 40, or 50% of what they owe. If we can clear it out to the best of our ability to get it down to zero, that's the best case scenario for everybody involved.
That's excellent. And the commissioner wrote me another note saying that you're asked to give a status report regularly. So we're not going to get surprised, you know, a couple months down the road. We're going to know where we are. Is rents. If an application is denied, are counties, jurisdictions actively providing residents with directions to access alternative support resources for which they might be eligible? Where do we send people if we can't help them?
Well, I can answer that.
I bet you can, Donna, because I know some people call you 5 times. So
Yes. Well, you know, United Way has a 211 program that serves the 13 counties. And so we received about 22,000 applications the first round, and about 75% of those were out of the jurisdiction. They were out of the area that we served. And so 211 was able to give them referrals, the referrals that are in our database, other nonprofits that are have funding, different funding other than COVID funding. We were able to give those referrals out to them as well. And not only just for rent, but 211 is there to assist just with other needs, underlying needs. If people need food or housing or clothing, or if they're looking for medical services, that's what 211 is about. Our goal is to educate and empower the community. So yes, we are giving other resources as needed.
and on your helplines in Gwinnett and Fulton, is that true too? Just you're there to help. If we can't help you here, we'll try to make a referral.
Yeah, one of the things that are into Fulton County application is that honestly have the opportunity to appeal that denial within our system. So we will and then counseling session that the applicant what the point of failure was for their application, and then certainly refer them to other sources, whether it's nonprofit or community, our community department, if they qualify for those as well.
Yeah, and in Gwinnett, our day job is actually as the coordinated entry system lead entity. So for those that are either denied or that the landlord doesn't want to participate, in some cases, we're able to actually put them through and coordinate entry to try and get in front of the potential homeless episode and deal with the rehousing situation that way through our resources and those of our wonderful nonprofit partners in our community.
So we've only got a few minutes, and we're going to pivot to actually hearing from Judge Kirk. Was there a question that you were wanting to answer that I didn't ask or nobody asked you? What really is maybe heavy on your heart that you want to say to all of us in the larger community that didn't come up? So we're going to go around very quickly, and you can pass on it if you want, but if there's anything you want to say, I'm giving you that opportunity.
Can I start?
You may.
I don't share anything in particular other than the way contact culture. I was surprised to contact us because we launched a very communication effort. So our call center number, even though our application is suspended for now, our call center is still open. That telephone 833-766-2223. And the other thing to share, if anybody wants real-time information that tracks of the applications as well as all of the moving parts of our program, they can go to fultoncountyga.com/rent help, and our open data website, all of the financial information for our program is available.
Excellent. And I don't know if you caught that, George, if you can get it up on the screen, because Anna was breaking up a little bit. Matt, any last words?
Yeah, I think the biggest one is that this is an opportunity to be bold and to go the extra mile. We have an unprecedented amount of money that's hitting our communities, and we have an unprecedented level of need. And this is the time to expand programs, drop barriers, increase accessibility, and to cross those thresholds. I know specifically in Gwinnett, for our ERAT program, we are deploying a 20-person team for just community engagement outreach, and we worked very closely with United Way and the work they did with the City of Atlanta to do those outreach events where people are and going to them to access them and to provide that assistance on the ground, as opposed to just having an application available at one static location or online. So I would say that for all of us here on this call and for those that may watch it afterwards, just be bold, think bigger, and go stronger than ever before, because the opportunity's there. We have to take this weakness that is COVID-19 and turn it into a strength or opportunity that then becomes a strength for us long term, because going back's not an option.
All right, we got a new tagline for the housing forum. Be bold. Huh? Think big.
Yeah.
Thank you all. I know everybody's working double time. I could just imagine, Anna, when you said we're going to start March 1st, your team must have gone, what are you thinking? And you did it. So thank you all for what you're doing. I'm sure we'll hear from you again, and we'll be monitoring the work. Everyone here appreciates your efforts. Okay, we're going to pivot, and Anna gave us a good segue to how important the courts are and how they're operating. Judge Kirk is actually working right now, could not be here, but we taped a segment with her, kind of ask her those key questions. So George, if you can bring that up, Chief Judge Cassandra Kirk. Thank you, Judge Kirk, for joining us yet again at the Regional Housing Forum. I know there's a lot of demands on your time. Can you give us a general update on how the courts are currently operating under the extended eviction moratorium?
Absolutely, and it's a pleasure to be here with you all again. I can tell you that Fulton, like many of the other courts that are currently operating, the statewide judicial emergency as well as the pandemic have given us an opportunity to review how our business practices work. And so that's great for us as well as for our consumers, for the people using our courts. As a result, what we have done in Fulton is we've upgraded our judicial team usage. We have looked at ways to boost our customer service. And of course, we have increased our IT teams. What that looks like for the public is now we can hold court in person, we can hold court on Zoom, and we can do a hybrid, which is a combination of the two. For those people that are still concerned about traveling and coming down to locations where there are a lot of people, we have an opportunity for them to stay on Zoom. So that has opened up an opportunity for us as well as for the citizens that we serve.
Well, I think that's really good news, and the old saying of never waste a pandemic, not something we would ask for, but it sounds like you've really looked in, around innovation in the court. Currently, some of the tenants are protected from eviction by the CDC moratorium. I know that's being challenged. Are you finding that most of the defendants are aware of the moratorium? And if not, how could we gain awareness?
In Fulton, we have a great resource in our Housing Court Assistance Clinic, which is run by Atlanta Volunteer Lawyers Foundation. They have done a great job in making sure that as they do navigation on our landlord tenant calendars, that they are making sure people know that. One thing that Fulton has done as well is we actually had a town hall with WAOK and Dr. Rashad Ritchie as another way to push that information out. But we are finding even now, and I spoke earlier about our marshals are sending us second writ reviews, because that's another part of the process that we are doing now, that there are tenants that do not know that, but there are some that are bringing their declarations that they have to their landlords as the marshals are coming at the door. So I would say that the best way to roll that out is forums like this, and then those advocacy groups for landlords as well as tenants. Right.
Well, that's the real challenge, isn't it? Communicating to the larger community and to those in need. Looking ahead to the rest of 2021, do you anticipate that the eviction filings will continue to hold steady, or do you think they'll increase, decrease?
And so thank you for this. The way the courts are looking now, if you can see our numbers that are up on the screen, in 2019, Fulton County alone had 45,000 landlord tenant filings. And that number in 2020 dropped to 22,000, about 23,000. Those other 30,000 or 20,000 landlords that did not file, I believe they did not file only because they knew that courts were closed, that cases were moving slowly. And I believe that's borne out by our numbers. When we looked at January, February of last year, we had 8,300 filings in those 2 months. That is our normal filing for the year. And so as people believe that 2020 was going to start well, people filed as they normally did. When we got into April and May, many of the landlords realized that the eviction moratorium was happening, that there was the CARES Act, that courts were closed. And so we had less filings, but still filings. As people believed that cases were opening up, or courts were opening up and the eviction moratorium was ending, we had 4,500 filings November, December. I will tell you that in 2021, just January and February alone, we have already had 5,000 filings. I anticipate that there will be a catch up for those, the difference from 2020, and then those people that are newly available to file in 2021. So our numbers, I know that we did a justice override view, and our numbers in Fulton County Magistrate Court alone that we are anticipating is 173,000, and that's just open cases, things that haven't been touched since the pandemic. And that includes about 52 anticipated filings in our landlord tenant calendar.
So once this crisis, passes and the relief funds are depleted, are there any policy changes governing the relationship between the landlord and the tenant, or the strengthened tenant rights? What do you suggest, and what are the judges talking about?
One of the things that our Fulton County Commission has done, and I want to give Vice Chairman Natalie Hall a shout out at this point. One of the things that they have done is looked at an opportunity, looked at ways for those tenants that find themselves on our calendars but are not actually evicted. So either their case settles, either they mediate the case with the landlord or they pay upon initial filing, so that those people are not further penalized. What we know is that these cases continue on people's credit, they continue on their just on their histories as they are looking for new places to stay. But not every one of our 45,000 cases results in an eviction, and it's unfair for the landlord and it's unfair for the tenant.
So we hope that we're a learning community and that we can learn from this. So we'll come back to those suggestions and track them. I want to thank you and thank the whole panel of judges. I mean, everybody stepped up. We appreciate the hard work. We thank you for taking time to be a part of the forum.
Thank you, and thank you for this forum. Best of luck.
Thank you. Okay, we're back live. I want to thank again Judge Kirk and the whole team of judges. Judge Kirk has been fully available to all of us. We talk to her regularly. That last question about policy suggestions, that is not an easy one to answer for a judge, and she did answer it. I find her a very sincere servant leader, so I applaud her work. I want to reference, George sent me a note that there were comments about other jurisdictions. We just covered 3 today, and we did that in the interest of time because we wanted to hear from each segment. But I think you can expect in the future to get updates from Cobb and DeKalb and other jurisdictions in future forums. Again, it was just a matter of time. Okay, so we've heard from Georgia DCA, the agency with most of the dollars to distribute. We've heard from local jurisdictions and how they're going to roll out the dollars and the challenges they face. We've heard from the judge and what they're anticipating at the courts. This may be the most important segment coming up, where we really want to have folks on the ground talk about how it's working for them, for people who own property. We should never forget that when a moratorium comes and people are able to stay, the folks who own the property may not be able to pay the bank their mortgage. So everybody's caught in this. And we are looking to different participants here. So let me just invite them in. We have Darren Dunn from Atlantica Properties, property owner, and I would say a very conscious property owner that's working, both sides, looking after the tenants. We have Stephen Lee from the Center for Pan Asian Community Services, and with special needs there. And Andrea Reese. Andrea, we've had you here before, and Star C. I hope a lot of folks that are listening today have participated in some of your forums at Star C because they're so instructive. So we thank you for that. Let me just kind of go around the circle here. Andrea, you had considerable experience, particularly in Cobb County, around the CARES Act money. I know you learned a lot from that. How is this program in comparison to that? What's different about it or the same?
Well, first, I'd like to thank you for having me back again today. In addition to experience in Cobb County, we also administer CARES Act funding in DeKalb County and partner with the United Way to execute on the grant for the City of Atlanta funding as well. So we had experience in all three of those jurisdictions. With the new emergency rental assistance program, it's very important for everyone to realize upfront that it is a completely different program. It's not the same as CARES. The requirements are the same. And we've been getting a lot of feedback from tenants who think that their previous applications can be reused or referenced for this program, but they cannot. It is totally different, mainly in the level of documentation that it requires from the tenants. And that has been a source of disappointment and frustration because people wanted the programs to be much easier. But this program has an income requirement. It has an income limit of up to 80% of area median income, which varies, of course, by family/household size. But for a family of 4, that would be about $66,000 a year is the maximum income limit for people who can get assistance under this new program. They have to provide proof of all that. They have to provide information on everyone living in the household, all the other adults, even regardless of the actual relationships or family structure, all of the information for everyone living in the household. They have to provide the entire lease, which is very different for us, and different things like that. So the requirements.
Andrea, is this kind of like going to the doctor's office and we have to fill out the form every time? And you go, we should have that on record.
It kind of is like
looking forward is the next round of money. Do we have to start all over again, or do we have a system that we think will work?
It depends on what the federal government dictates. Everything about this program has been dictated by the federal government, and I found that they're being a lot more stringent with this new program than they were with the CARES Act, even though I think we may be running into more of that on the back end now with them coming back to ask for more information. But this new program currently, there's a 12-month time period for assistance that you could get as far as going back, but there's no dollar amount. So potentially tenants can get a lot more help. Now Star C can help with utilities, which we were not doing before, except for in the City of Atlanta. So this is a program that can offer a lot more assistance to tenants and also to landlords in collaboration with those tenants, but it does require a bit more. As far as what happens in the future, it's all up to the federal government. I wish that they would do a debrief with the different states and incorporate some of that feedback into what they require, but we'll have to see how that goes.
Well, that may be a question for the commissioner as we look forward. Darren, I'm gonna look to you as a property owner. Now, I have to say, you're the most enlightened property owner that I've met in a long time. A man who really cares about his tenants, and I know Star C operates in the same way, because the more we take care of our tenants, the more they take care of our property, and you have less things going wrong. But how is this impacting property owners? And specifically, we're probably talking about Class C more than Class A and Class B, as people have moved down. And can you tell us a little bit more about the trust issue? Because I've asked each participant about that, but this is kind of where the rubber hits the road. Darren?
Yes. Thanks, Bill, for having me for this very important conversation to represent the perspective of the property owner. To start, most property owners are experiencing challenges. However, the challenge for Class C property owners can have a greater impact on that property owner and their tenants. And it's really because most lower income tenants actually live in these smaller properties that are owned by smaller landlords. So first, let's talk quickly about the grade of properties. Class A properties are usually those newer properties that have higher rents and are institutionally owned. And then you have Class B that are slightly older properties. And then you have Class C properties where most of our low income tenants live. These are properties that are usually 20 years or older, might have some deferred maintenance, and have affordable rents. The typical Class C tenant is someone that pays less than $1,200. This is about 60% area median income. But we also need to talk about the typical Class C property owner. The typical Class C property owner is an individual or a small working class investor. They're not large institutions. They're not REITs. They're not big funds. They're small business owners that actually have day jobs and might just be lucky enough to have an investment of a home or a small apartment complex.
Right.
So if tenants aren't able to pay their rent, that actually affects other working class people who are property owners. So it's very much of a symbiotic relationship. You want to make sure you have help for those tenants because it ultimately impacts that landlord. I'll also speak to the fact that we have many cases 10, 20, 30% delinquency in some of these properties during this pandemic. Now, like any small business, many of these landlords work on profit margins that are 10 to 20 to 30%, pretty modest profit margins. So if you have a property that is experiencing 10, 20, 30% reduction of revenue, and then you basically have wiped away your profit, this creates a challenge where you could have a property become insolvent. And we have to ask, well, why is that important? It's because this is where most of our vulnerable tenants are. If you have property owners that can't pay their bills, they can't pay their mortgage, we're at risk of losing those affordable units. We're at risk of losing those units in the marketplace. And going one step deeper, the investors that are behind these property owners. We have banks, regional, local banks that are in essence investors. They have debt on the property. And you have small investment groups that are providing these affordable housing options. If these investors and owners are hit hard by the loss of revenue, then we're going to lose capital to preserve and even create more affordable housing. And that we're at risk of that capital drying up. And the last thing we need is actually capital going away from creating more affordable housing. We need more of that capital flooding into this arena. And if they see it as a high risk because tenants don't have help, then that actually can wipe away some of that preservation that we've been creating over the last few years. And I'll say lastly, being a landlord is a very personal business, and we don't want to lose those small and medium-sized landlords because tenants actually benefit from a property owner having that personal connection with them, as opposed to maybe if they live in a larger property where there's maybe less flexibility in how that maybe institutionally owned property can work with that tenant. If you can call a landlord that owns the house you live in or call the management company of the small apartment complex you live in, they literally know your name. They know you. And if they know you have good intentions, they're much more willing to work with you. So we have to provide that support and that help for tenants simply so we can actually keep these property owners in place so we can continue to have those affordable units.
Wow, that's a great point. And if there were 300 people listening to you right now about this very issue and they wanted to make a phone call, or write a letter, or have a meeting about that, how do we address that? I mean, do we call the banks and say he's up?
Yeah,
I mean, there's a process.
The banking industry has done a good job, whether it's agency lenders like Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, or just your local bank. They have provided some forbearances, but let's not be confused. Those forbearances really just tack on that money to the end of your loan or onto your balance. So there is some help out there for folks with their mortgages, just like people with their personal homes. You can apply for a forbearance. But the challenge that we have and some of the trust issues that you were speaking to, Bill, many landlords are unsure about the future help that is available. Much of the conversation that we're talking about is about arrears, about going back in time. But if landlords are unsure about the future help they're going to get for that tenant, especially with the CDC moratorium extending until June, you have some landlords that are reluctant to accept that rental assistance because they are thinking about the future of their business and the viability of their small business. So we have to make sure that we have enough funding and that it can get to those tenants efficiently, simply so you don't have landlords that are, have some pause about actually accepting this help, because if that tenant still has financial issues a month or two from then, after they've received the check, they're going to be right back in the same situation of being at risk of being evicted.
So I'm wondering, and these questions are just popping up from what you're sharing. You and Andre both own property. we have an Atlanta Apartment Association, the big association, and that, you know, they represent all of us in that business. But how much networking is there done between small property owners, as you talk about? I mean, who do they talk to each other? Is there any association for that group? Is there a network?
There's a formal and informal networks. The Atlanta Apartment Association, AAA, they are a great resource for the voice and advocacy for property owners. And again, most landlords are small business owners. They're not large institutions that have a lot of butts behind them. And then most small operators, we call ourselves operators. We talk to each other. We're an industry, so we know what the property owner is doing down the street. I get calls all the time from my property managers at my different properties around town, and they say, "Hey, I heard that there's a resource. This nonprofit has a few extra dollars. One of the property owner friends called me, so I'm going to apply for some of our tenants for those funds." So there definitely is a network, formally and informally, in the Class C property owner realm.
That's encouraging. Stephen, you may have thought I was never going to get to you, but from the Center for Pan American Community Services, that we had a very strong and positive relationship with the food bank, and you guys are doing great work. What are you seeing on your end in supporting renters and folks?
First of all, thank you for having me in this important conversation. Last year, we received the CARES Act rental assistance funding from Gwinnett and DeKalb counties. And because, of course, our target populations are immigrants and refugees, we expected to assist many immigrants and refugees in Gwinnett County and DeKalb, especially there is a huge concentration of refugee household in the city of Clarkston. But it turned out that we assisted mostly non-immigrant and refugee renters because it was kind of cultural or the life experience of our clients, the refugees. Like example, like Burmese and Bhutanese, before they are entering into settled in the U.S., they had to live in the camp, refugee camp, for the past like 20 years. So, the paying rent is top priority for them. So no matter what happens, they, borrowing it, like mostly they borrow from relatives and friends. So even if there are huge needs, because the refugee community got impacted by the pandemic, they lost job and they follow up from their jobs. So when we asked them to the basic eligibility, which is do you have a proof of need, which is late notice, but they couldn't provide it. Simply they were not late, like paying their rent. So we had to educating them, stop borrowing. You are simply accumulating debts. So next time, if you cannot pay, just don't pay, and then you will be able to get some assistance. So there were a lot of a lack of understanding, and also now it's more like language barriers. They don't know where to apply for this assistance, and also after applying, because simply they cannot understand the English. So that's kind of a huge barrier for our communities.
So this is challenging work, and it's doubly challenging as we look at cultural needs and being able to translate some of these concepts or language. I think it really comes back, let me just kind of go around, it really comes back to the question of what is your role as a property owner, right, in communicating, educating. There's a lot of folks don't understand the moratorium, and we're trying to help people understand what that means. What is your role? Stephen, you've talked about that being a role, that being a primary challenge. Andrea, is this something you guys, over and above providing an apartment, but do that kind of education as part of your business plan?
We try to educate as much as we can from an ownership side, and then in my nonprofit role with Star C, we try to communicate with others in our industry. We try to educate our tenants. We're setting up means even now with a new program to educate partner landlords and tenants on our new program. We host events for the public, different things like that that we do to educate. We try to connect people with resources if they're kind of beyond the boundaries of where we are right now. We try to connect them with resources. So we're kind of moving out more in that space as well.
Okay, and I'm going to ask George if there's questions from the audience, but while they're coming up, a number of you own properties cross jurisdiction, you know, and each jurisdiction is handling it a particular way. How do you keep up with that?
I'll start. It's extremely hard. That's one of the greatest challenges for the property management community and small owners, is because you have resident cooperation issues that we kind of touched on already, and then inconsistency of eligibility requirements depending on what jurisdiction you're in. You have administrative backlogs where the websites will be up and then they might be down as they process applications. And then I've actually heard some of the challenges from the tenant side where the tenants don't have access to some of the information they need to successfully apply for the funds, you know, about uploading leases, uploading their tenant ledgers. Many tenants don't have their tenant ledgers. You know, that's something that many times is needed for these programs. One of the things that I think would be helpful is having real-time application processing statuses. That's something that we need because someone might be up for eviction next week and they might be right on the precipice of getting funding. But if we don't know their status, that property owner might proceed with that eviction. We don't know exactly where they are in the time.
Well, how would that work, Diane?
Well, it's really going to be technology. And I know that's something probably DCA and other agencies are looking into, but having that real-time processing, because you just can't call a number and get someone on the phone, no matter what jurisdiction it is. They're so busy and they're focusing on what's in front of them. You can't call and say, hey, where is my tenant in the process? So us not having that direct real-time status update can actually make more tenants vulnerable of losing their home.
I'd like to respond to that as well. With Star C, you can call us and get an update on your application, because we do have people answering the phones. I will say what we've run into with this latest round is we're getting a lot of incomplete applications. So it's a lot of back and forth with the tenants for them to understand exactly what's required, completing the applications correctly. So it's a lot of assistance needed and case management needed for the tenants in regards to that. As far as staying aware of what the different requirements are for every jurisdiction, generally speaking, the requirements for this emergency rental assistance are the same as far as the income limitation, having to provide the household information and that sort of thing. What I'm observing is differences in the level of technology. And even now, Star C is in the process of implementing Neighborly, which you've heard Gwinnett is using and Fulton County is using. So we're in the process of that, but the levels of technology are really all over the place. And then the level of your ability to reach a person to talk to. And then there are some differences in the amount of assistance that can be obtained per jurisdiction, because there's a 12-month maximum going back, but some jurisdictions have lowered that. So that's just an extra challenge for the landlord to stay on top of that sort of thing.
And I think you're really speaking to, Lynette's asking a very good question. Why are some requirements different than others in jurisdictions? Some are more flexible, some to be harder. That's up to the county or the jurisdiction? They make their own rules?
Well, generally speaking, the requirements are the same as far as the income limits, having to provide the lease. Those sorts of things are kind of generally the same. There may be some wiggle room, but these are federal dollars and the federal government is setting the requirements for this. As far as the amount of assistance that may vary by county, If I could reference Fulton County in that, in earlier conversations that I heard from them, they had looked at what were the average monthly rental amounts in areas where they thought that they would pay out the most assistance, and they decided to cap that at 6 months, based on an average rent of about $1,300, if I'm recalling correctly at that time, so that they could try to help as many people as possible. So there are different things in place like that.
So let me ask, do you feel as owners and folks that have actually got to execute the plan on the ground, do you feel heard? Do you feel like when you put input into the different counties, you know, they may have some variations, but do you feel like they're addressing some of your concerns? Stephen, does things come in more than one language? English? I mean, how do we translate?
We provide translation because our staff speaks more than 15 languages. So yeah, we like probably we explain them and interpret them.
I think the agencies are doing their best to provide the help that they need. But really, it's going to be the onus, whether we like it or not, the onus is going to be on the small landlord, the small property owner, to become almost that type of social worker. Many of my property managers, they spend most of their time actually helping tenants, whether it be applying for new jobs if they lost their job, applying for funding through DCA's website or the different county websites. So I really do think that burden is laid upon us, and we have to accept it, because we can't look to the state agencies or the counties to help those individuals when we are right with those individuals. We're at their homes. So I think that is a burden that most of us are willing to accept, honestly, because it's for self-preservation reasons. We have to take on that burden to be able to help where maybe some of those gaps are at the higher level.
Excellent. Let me see if the commissioner's still with us. Commissioner Nunn, thanks for staying through the whole program. We're referencing you guys a lot, and we're talking about how the counties work. Anything you've heard that you could clarify or give us any updates on? You're on mute, or George has you on mute.
No, I had me on mute.
Okay.
I won't blame George. I'm trying to get some multitasking done, but listening through the discussion, I do think that I appreciate Audrey's points about the requirements. I know that in a conversation that we had among all 13 providers, as these funds were being disseminated, we all kind of urged and exercised caution in adding any additional requirements to those that were laid out by Treasury. And that really gets down to, stems from our interest in getting these funds out as quickly and responsibly as possible. Additional requirements, add to the time it takes to get those funds out. I appreciated the comment about technology. Again, I kind of alluded to this in my opening remarks. In most cases, to stand up a technology platform, one would lay out a plan to execute and to implement and to integrate.
Yeah, let's take a year or two to get that right.
Exactly. And we said, look, that is not acceptable given the needs in our communities. Darian, I cannot thank you enough for the work you do and the perspective you represent. And I echo everything Bill said about your commitment, not only to the landlord side, but also to your tenants. On your point about reaching a person to talk to, I just did the quick math on this because I agree. I mean, I said I grew up in that small town. I appreciate the ability to get an answer and to get things worked through just with the immediate funds that we have, not including the American Rescue Plan Act funds that will be coming, and taking the average amount, of payout that has been discussed on this call. That's 142,000 transactions. And so I think, from, all of us, putting our practical hat on, can appreciate that we do need to leverage technology, to the extent we are able, because the cost and the ability to execute on that front is difficult. So hopefully we're kind of getting getting that balance right. hopefully we are working as a community of learning, learning from one another, trying to improve on what has been put in place. Keep in mind, it has been, I believe, 6 weeks since the first community in the state of Georgia stood up their program. Ours has been up for 4 weeks. You've heard from some that are still, we are moving lightning fast to try to help our community. So, Bill, I don't know if there was something you wanted me to address specifically, but those were a few thoughts that I had jotted down as y'all were.
No, that's exactly what I wanted. And this is the part of the program where the moderator gets very nervous that I can bring it in by 11:15. So I'm gonna pivot here to Jack, Harden, Darren, Stephen, Andrea. Thank you. Thank you for what you do every day, for the education you're doing, for the cooperative relationships that we've developed. Thank you very much. Can we bring Jack up? Jack, welcome. Here's a man who's probably spent as much or more time than anybody in town. We wanted to come back to kind of give an update on SOAR. But I think the other thing, because we've focused a lot at SOAR, Jack, on where the gaps may be and, kind of what we're going to keep watching for. So we have about 10 minutes at most, but I want to give you the floor to give us a quick update, what we've learned, because it really was a bottoms up effort when we didn't know if the feds were going to provide any help. And we thought, my goodness, we've got to do something. So I think you've personally talked to everybody we've talked to on the panel multiple times, but give us an update on where things are.
Well, thank you, Bill, and thank you for this forum. I think these panels have been great and the information is great. And as you know, we stood up SOAR at a time when federal benefits were expiring and the moratoria were scheduled to expire. And we thought we were going to be trying to muster an effort to hold people in their homes until federal relief arrived. And through extensions of the moratoria and the emergency rental assistance that was authorized by Congress and signed by the president in late December, we never had to raise private money to address these issues. What we did during that period of time, though, is construct a collaboration of over 40 entities and lots of caring and informed people. We did a lot of research. We learned where the problems were. We were able to share with these 13 jurisdictions as they were beginning to stand up their programs, the things that we had learned over the process. And now they're in an operational mode and we're in an observational mode. This forum is very helpful because it helps us in our role of trying to identify where the gaps may be, what problems might exist, and what role, if any, we can play or private money can play in trying to address these issues. We've already identified a number that we anticipated. One, of course, are income limits. That is to say that, as Matt Hurt pointed out, the loss of jobs and the impact of COVID has not just fallen on people at 80% of AMI or below, but there are others who are facing severe rental crises. We've learned about the cultural barriers. We anticipated some of that, but now we really know just how difficult it is where people don't know how to access the benefits, and even those who want to try to access them are just unable to understand the languages. We've learned that the folks that rely on non-standard housing, and there are lots of ways, lots of kinds of that, but we've talked about the people in the limited stay hotels. There are programs, Donna was kind enough to mention motel to home programs where we do try to move people from limited stay hotels into standard housing, but those are small compared to the number of people who are accessing limited stay hotels for housing, and they're complicated to execute.
So that would be one of the gaps that we know exist. This money's not for them, yet there's still a need there. We literally have thousands of people living in extended stay hotels. So other areas that SOAR will be monitoring?
Well, I think the technology piece is very interesting. We discovered as we began to look at this that there was not a technology platform in the community that works to solve this problem. And you heard Anna talk about how their awareness of that informed a little bit about how they went about standing up their program. And now we see this drift towards Neighborly, that Gwinnett and Fulton, and now we hear from Audrey that that Star C is going on that software. But we also hear from Darren that the absence of real-time communication between the tenants and the landlords about where they stand in the relief process and the landlord's need could be improved. And I don't think we have a technology solution, visible one for that at the moment. I do think that the point that so many of these landlords are small and they have significant problems maintaining their properties, paying their mortgage, paying their employees without this assistance points to the mortgage assistance gap that exists. And I know that Commissioner Nunn noted that while these funds are not for this, they are funds in the American Rescue Plan for mortgage relief. But we've yet to see what the full contours of all of that will be.
And I know this is coming out of the blue here, but I know you're fully capable of answering this. One of the things from where you sat co-chairing the Regional Commission for the Homeless, we saw this tsunami coming at us as help didn't come. So help has come. It's not going to serve everybody. There's challenges in the execution, as we know. But what progress have we made at the Regional Commission? Because this was the Regional Commission is not set up to handle 50,000 people that could hit the streets. But I know there's been some real learnings there, some innovation around getting people into housing. Could you just take a couple of minutes giving an update?
Well, sure. I would say that someone mentioned, maybe it was you, Bill, that we shouldn't waste a crisis. And we've tried not to do that with the availability of CARES Act funds. So we have been able to address things in ways and at levels that we weren't able to before. I'll give you an example that's on my mind is the LIFT strategy that's being implemented inside the city of Atlanta, where cobbling together some CARES Act funds that the city of Atlanta had access to and some private funding. And addressing the fact that during this pandemic, the options available to people experiencing homelessness shrunk tremendously. Some shelters closed, other shelters closed their doors to new admittees. Churches were closed, businesses were closed, and a lot of the options available to someone who becomes unsheltered shrunk. And we saw a tripling of people seeking shelter at public infrastructure like the airport or in MARTA, at bus stops and such places. And the LIFT strategy was designed to take people directly off the streets and put them into housing by using a rapid rehousing strategy. Only possible because of CARES Act funding that was available. And we saw what Matt was able to do up in Gwinnett with their reset program with CARES Act funds. So there were a number of strategies that we were able to implement. The impact of this was terrifying to those of us in the homeless business to suddenly think that we might have 30 or 40 more households, 30 or 40,000 more households to try to address. What we did find is the unsheltered population has grown, not just in our region, but all over the country. People are seeing increases in that. And there are funds available through the American Rescue Plan that we hope to be able to continue some of our strategies in addressing that component. So I don't know if I'm addressing the issue that you wanted me to, Bill, but.
Well, you are, and I know, the Regional Commission has contracted with hotels to get people in there. We're working on supportive housing, which is a model we know will work. Jack, thank you for your leadership. I mean, you took this on as a volunteer for the SOAR board, who has given us great input and participation. This has been a community effort. So I know SOAR will continue to exist in the sense that we'll continue to learn, share those learnings from each other, monitor what's going on, and try to learn from that. So thank you, Jack.
Thank you, Bill.
Now, let me try to finish up today. What we've been talking about is the need for creativity, doing things in a new way, for flexibility, and being able to willing to bend a little or try things, to have a long-term vision. This is really important because the Housing Forum doesn't typically spend a whole forum just talking about emergency programs. I mean, we're trying to talk about the systemic issue. We know that in the coming year, and this is actually a forum that we planned earlier, is to talk about zoning. It's alive and well throughout the region. Those decisions give guidance to density, to innovation around building materials, around models for affordable housing, and they have to be embraced by each jurisdiction. And there's a lot of creativity around the country, so we're going to keep coming back to that. We also know there's a mayoral election coming up this year, and every day a few more people are throwing their hands into the ring to be mayor. We know that the Housing Forum played a critical role, particularly for our mayor, Mayor Bottoms, when we had a mayoral forum. That after that forum, she made a commitment of $1 billion. We hadn't seen all that money or very much of it, but we made the commitment. We're monitoring it. There's been some recent developments. So we can expect to set up a forum for a mayoral forum and maybe others. And then there's just the lessons learned during the pandemic. And that comes from sharing with each other. So I want to encourage, again, folks to follow up. This is going to work if people participate. If not, we won't keep doing it. But on, I think, April the 21st is the date for the follow-up conversation. And out of that, we may have actions that we want to take. And finally, I want to say, and we cannot, this is front and center. There's a national conversation as well as a local conversation going on about race and equity and inclusion that affects every area of our life and our work. And the place that it may show up greater than any other area, and we know it shows up in healthcare and mental health care and food security, but the area where race, equity, inclusion shows up in housing and access to affordable housing. So we'll continue throughout the year to come back to that theme. I want to thank everybody who participated today. This will be taped, so you can go and find this if you want to see it again or send it to other people. Encourage people to do the follow-up conversation. I want to thank all the volunteers, the advisory committee, the steering committee, particularly George Bergen, who's a producer of making this happen. We're doing this every other month, which is a big lift for us volunteers. But I'm feeling more hopeful. I'm feeling like we're collaborating and talking to each other in ways that we've never done before. I feel like having DCA at the table, as well as counties, local nonprofits, advocates, people that live in the neighborhoods, having us at one table is essential to our collective future. So we'll see you again in a couple of months. Thank you very much.